You're listening to episode 109 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness teachers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Dana K. Lewis joins us to speak about Mindful Veterans Connection. For those who may be interested, I am again offering the full Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, or MBSR program, online, live, on a donation basis, starting at the end of April. This is the full 8-week program developed by Jon Kabat-Zinn, used as the gold standard for the scientific study of secular mindfulness programs. As far as I'm aware, this is the only MBSR online live program that doesn't have an upfront price of hundreds of dollars. At the end of the program, participants simply make a donation that they can. To find out more, to apply, please visit presentmomentmindfulness.com. Today we're continuing our exploration of mindfulness in the military, talking about a group reaching out to help veterans. Dana K. Lewis's first experience with meditation was in 1966, when he went to and fell in love with Japan, exploring Nichiren chanting and Zazen. He spent most of 1966 through 1977 in Japan and South Korea, and after leaving the Air Force early in 1976, worked in Japan for a year as an educational consultant to an education company and ran a small English school with his wife Yoko before returning to the U.S. He lived and worked at the Children's Home from 1977 to 1994, and in 2012 met Dr. Jenna Tedesco, who introduced him to secular mindfulness meditation and soon MBSR. From that time on, he was meeting at least once weekly with the MBSR grad groups in the Wilmington Veterans Administration under Dr. Tedesco. In 2015, he started mindfulvets.net on behalf of a core group of Delaware area vets so they could communicate and share resources around mindfulness practice, and now have members in the UK, Philippines, and India, as well as around the US. Our guest today is Dana K. Lewis. Dana, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate you spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great, looking forward to our talk.
So let's just dive right in. Tell us about your background.
Actually, I was born in 1945, 2 weeks after the Hiroshima bombing. My father was in the oil business, and I traveled around, so I lived all over the country, settling in the East Coast by the time I hit high school. Had a Catholic education. I went into a monastery for a few years. Interestingly, that tradition did not teach us anything at all about meditation, but that's another podcast. So I then was drafted. When I left the monastery, I was immediately drafted into the Army. I ran down and looked into the offices of the recruiters because everyone in my neighborhood of my age, male, was gone. I just lost two of my good friends. My stickball buddy had been killed a few weeks before I got my letter from the president. So I went in and I found that I saw the Marines, and I said, not for me. And no one was in the Naval office. And then the Air Force office, he was happy to see me. He saw the look of desperation and fear on my face. So I was promised to be a linguist because I had 2 years of college, and I tested well. But I ended up being a weatherman, and my first assignment was to Japan. And that's where everything changed when I fell in love with the culture. And in due time, of course, I fell in love with a wonderful Japanese woman. Her name is Yoko. There's two Yokos, they're prominent. John Lennon's Yoko is one set of characters, and my Yoko means sunshine child. And she has been my sunshine. I have to put that in there. But throughout the years, I finished my bachelor's while I was on a GI Bill, and my interest was in intercultural communication. As someone who had always been the new kid from out of town, I became sensitive as a boy to how different people in different places have different ways of connecting with each other, and I've always kind of followed that thread. And so that's what I ended up studying, and I did my bachelor's thesis on the microcosm, culture shock microcosm of military bases are microcosms of suburban USA plopped into various cultures all over the world. And so I passed, fortunately. Then I got out of the Air Force and I worked for a Japanese educational company for a while. And then Yoko and I ran a little English school until I had a health problem. We had one daughter, our daughter at that time. I decided I better come back to get medical care and not impose on my Japanese family, which they treated me like gold. So I came back to the States and found a job working at a children's home. Yoko and I became house parents. I had done volunteer work with delinquents in college, and I was drawn to working with children. My father was a coach, baseball and basketball coach, so I was drawn to working with children. So working with children ultimately became my passion and my vocation.
In fact, he's written a book, which I'll be linking on the episode page, Working with Children, Effective Communication Through Self-Awareness. And it's so interesting that as I reflect on that title, it's one that could have just come out now that uses mindfulness lingo in working with kids. So it's so interesting that you were talking about effective communication with self-awareness, working with children in what, 1980?
81 it came out.
Yeah.
So it was my master's thesis, and then I rewrote it for publication, and Sage Publications picked it up and carried it for over 10 years. But anyway, yes, in fact, I've thought thinking about that whole experience of writing that book, it came out of the fact that I went in there as a typical intellectual, just very cerebral. I knew a lot of stuff about a lot of things. At least I told myself that. I said, I should be able to figure this out. Okay. You put yourself in a room of 14, 15, and 16-year-old boys from the streets of Philadelphia and Harrisburg, etc., some of whom are juvenile delinquents under the eyes of the law, most of whom are abandoned, abused, troubled, and troubling children, we used to like to say. And it became rapidly apparent to me that all of my constructs, my understanding about communication and psychology, etc., all of it was not doing me any good. And then when I moved into supervision, my new boss said, "Oh, by the way, you're in charge of training." Now, this was in 1977. And back in those days, things were, not at all structured or regulated like they are now. And he said, "Well, no, we got to do some training." So the training assignment ended up, it all kind of coalesced for me. So, but when I was doing all of these trainings, I found out that all that communication theory really fit, really fit. But the piece that I now wish I had had would be all the mindfulness vocabulary. Because, in fact, I looked at a draft of something I wrote about 15, just my last year at the home, which was 1994. And now I know what I was looking for. I was looking for presence and attention, attending. And there's Ron Epstein wrote a wonderful book called Attending Medicine, Mindfulness, and Humanity. It's a beautiful, wonderful book. I want to write a book like that because he totally just, it's so obvious that he lives the mindfulness. I would love to be his student. Whoever gets him is a lucky guy. So the thing is that I didn't have the vocabulary for it, but now I do. And it's wonderful to see so much attention being paid to this whole aspect of how people help people.
Yeah, I want to ask how did during this time, when did you first come across meditation? Where did that enter things?
Okay. Yeah, that's another side of the story. When I arrived in Japan the first time, I was pretty unhappy with American culture. I felt I'd been lied to by my government. I had lost some good friends because of this stupid war, etc. And so I was an angry, angry guy, and I was just kind of rejecting my culture. So I found, well, look at this wonderful Asian culture, Japanese culture. It's been around a long time. So I just kind of threw myself into it. And so I had a Nichiren Shoshu, the Nichiren Soka which is some people say it's not Buddhist or whatever, but that's a whole other discussion. But anyway, I had the opportunity to go to a few sittings where everyone was chanting and everything. So I began to do that. But in terms of actual personal practice, my initial work with it, now when I look back on it, I totally did not get it at all. I totally didn't. I mean, I know there's no right or wrong. I know that's what we say. There's not a bad meditation. But in looking back on it, I was still staying left brain. I was still just being analytical. And that, unfortunately, in hindsight, a lot of my learning in Japanese culture and Korea, Okinawa, tended towards that side. But I'm sure that I know that living and loving a Japanese woman who was from a very traditional small village, that I've absorbed the better parts, I would hope, of the culture. So the meditation experience, as I experience it now, it was like on and off for years. I just didn't get it. Yeah. So I didn't do it. But I read voraciously, about meditation. I read about things. So it's like the colorblind student who did their postdoctoral work on red. So that was kind of me. So if you want me to talk about what I consider to be the beginning of my meditation, I consider that other business not really me entering into the having meditation / mindfulness in my life. It's kind of a neat little story because I had a spinal fusion. I have to backstory a little bit before I get to that, and you can help me remember what I was going to say. I had while working at the children's home, I was training a new supervisor in passive physical restraint. I mean, I was going to that night, but we had to use it before he got trained in it. And we had a psychotic girl, so it was he and I and one other staff. But if you don't know the technique, you can hurt yourself or the child. And I got hurt. So I twisted my spine. And I ended up getting a spinal fusion in 1984, which got infected and caused me permanent damage to my spinal cord. So I've been in chronic pain since then. And also running from, I have a genetic predisposition to depression and alcoholism, runs in the family. So I'll leave out all of the Jerry Springer stuff in terms of all the dark moments and bad times of my life. So fast forward now to when I'm at my absolute worst in 2007. I'm at my worst, ready to cash in my chips and all of that. So psychiatrist basically washed her hands of me at the VA. Not really. She said, I think you should try this group. So I went to it, and I didn't like groups when I was running things at the children's home. I thought I didn't understand them. I know now. But it was cognitive behavioral therapy, and it was the group number one, which was an 8-week, basically like a training course in CBT. And it started to click for me. Being able to notice you, observe your own thoughts. That's an interesting idea. And then to decouple from them so that you don't identify with them and go down the rabbit hole every time something goes wrong. So I really liked it intellectually. And so it was easier for me to try it out. So I did the worksheets, and the group of guys, these vets, I could talk all day about them, wonderful people. They too, all of them in the room will say, this saved my life. Okay. So I'm into the second group, which is an ongoing group. And after the initial 8-week training, and this young lady comes in. I'm an old guy, so she's a young lady. She's in her 40s anyway. And so she comes in, she has a little bell, and she's real bubbly and sunshiny. And I'm thinking she's kind of like hippie type. I said, hippie chick. And that was the wonderful Jenna Tedesco. We call her Dr. Jenna over here at the VA in Wilmington, Delaware. So she did basically a guided sit, 20 minutes, and something went off in my head. I said, well, how do I learn to do this? She said, well, we have an 8-week course. It's called MBSR. And then I was in the next cohort of a few months later, and the Raisin and I kind of bonded. We were like one. It was like a cosmic experience.
My favorite exercise in the entire program is that.
It really is. And actually, I was in training yesterday. We have a new group, and I'm in training for teacher training. So we sit in on any of the mindful training that's done for the other patients and veterans. And so we did it again yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. And by the end of the 8 weeks, I was meditating every day, once or twice, but I was really experimenting with informals, all kinds. And that's it. And then there's a whole other progression, another long story there in terms of how I've changed. I can get into that whenever you want me to.
I do want to hear, let's hear about that now, and then we'll go into mindful vets, because I did want to ask, how has this influenced you since that?
Okay. Yeah. The way I answer this question is usually I'll say, well, for me, my life is divided into before mindfulness and after mindfulness. Before mindfulness in 2011, I needed a sleeping pill to sleep. I needed a pill for depression. I needed opiates for my pain. About 3 years ago, with the approval of my doctor, I completely stopped taking pain medication. The year before that, I stopped taking my Cymbalta and the other things that they had tried on me. So after mindfulness, now in 2018, I don't need chemicals to help me sleep or experience my pain. And I'd say the biggest, don't like to use too many superlatives, but it's wonderful to be able to feel happy. I didn't know what that was like because in those days we didn't know about depression, but I was dysthymic disorder almost all of my life, and I self-medicated, like most depressives, like start off doing. And so now, let's say it this way. My wife said to me, it's really nice to have you back, Dana. And I'm able to be in the moment. I'm able to be a better husband, a better grandfather. What it's led me to is this urge to help other people, to spread the love. It's like a natural progression. The biggest challenge I have is not being like that good friend who went on such and such diet who lost 50 pounds and then is obnoxious to everyone saying, well, you should try this diet. This diet. Yeah, I don't want to be that guy. But then John Kabat-Zinn somewhere, I think he said, if you feel like preaching to your friends or family about mindfulness, go sit. Just meditate. Don't preach. So the biggest challenge is to, with the enthusiasm for it, but it's changed me. Okay, good illustration. A few years ago, after I'd moved into this wonderful territory I'm in now, I saw a few people, a family and longtime friends I hadn't seen in a long time. And they said, they all said, "Hey, Dana, what did you working out? Did you lose weight? Or what's up with you? You look great." I said, well, I learned some mindfulness and I meditate all the time. But don't you have that chronic pain thing? Yeah. Don't you have that neuropathy? Well, what about this depression? I thought you were like, on the deep end. I said, well, yeah, I was. And I like to say, I'm not saying it won't come back. I know the statistics, I know the data, but the fact that I've not relapsed to severe depression now in 2 years, now, if it starts to rear its head, I have plenty of tools. And of course, if I need to go for help, I go for help. If they say, yes, take your medication, I take the medication. So that's an important point that I like to stress with people. It's not to say that, everyone will say, I really wish I didn't have to do the medication, but each person I feel has to know the balance of their pills and their skills. And so it's never going to give anyone a sense of disapproval that they still need to take medication for pain or depression or whatever. Each of us finds our own way of dealing with these things. And so I guess that's where I'm at now. And maybe leading the mindful vets. Let me tell you how that came to be. I was watching a documentary of a young Iraq veteran young man, and he was living in a trailer alone in Montana or Wyoming, or whatever, but he had satellite TV and he had internet. And they told this story, and it was long, and it was just so sad. It was tragic and everything. And he did end up killing himself, even though the VA had sent people out and everyone had done everything. And it seemed to me, I thought, well, he had internet. Now, what if there was a place where a veteran could go talk to another veteran? Now, it's hard to explain without sounding like a B movie, but it's hard to explain. But there is a connection when you sign up for something that says, like my TI said to me, your heart may belong to Susie Q, but your ass belongs to Uncle Sam. You really, really put your life, you have to do whatever and whatever, go wherever. And having been through that and then been through the craziness that was the Vietnam War. So I was thinking of this guy, and I said, wouldn't it be great if there was that he's there, he's depressed, he's drinking or whatever, and he's online and he comes across a place for veterans. Someone else that may have been in Iraq like him says, hey man, yeah, I've been there, man. And boom. I was involved in, before the web, I was involved in a thing called Meta Network. It no longer exists. It's subsumed under another thing, but it was before chat, it was around the same time as RCs and that college to college, net. And we had a community there, a virtual community. Now I thought, I experienced some wonderful things there. We had a teenager who was going to kill herself, and we managed to actually get the police to her door one night when I was on duty. And so I always remember that. And so I thought of this Marine, and I was thinking, well, maybe, in his solitude and his agony, he might be scrolling around. And if he hits that veteran thing, oh, there's a bunch of veterans. And the right thing on the top, it says, veterans in crisis, here's what you do, or whatever. The thing is that it seemed to me that a network like this with the new web and with the video, and now you're telling me about the Zoom, there's just really a great potential. That's just another thing that they can reach out to. I started the site at the same time that my own curiosity about the science behind mindfulness took off. You've heard of binge watching, of course. Well, I'm a binge reader. When I get a topic that piques my curiosity, I usually will read like a crazy man. So while I was doing all this reading, I would just put up little reviews here and there and onto the website. Next thing you know, it had a little volume to it. And what happened was that other people outside of the veteran community started noticing it. And so I started hearing from different people. So now we have a member in India, Philippines, UK, around the United States. And I'm really happy that we've got some mindful VA staff. Now, they're not officially because the VA is not quite there yet. But they're all using mindfulness. And I think there's like 40 different places where these mindfully based, inspired clinicians, social workers, doctors, nurses, who are doing something using mostly MBSR and BCT. So it's now unofficially spreading around the VA staff. So those people actually just signed up just before Christmas. So, and we also have a few researchers that are interested in our group. So that's how that evolved.
Yeah. So since that time, since those beginnings, it's grown. As you mentioned, you have people all over the world now who are part of this. I'm wondering what some of the stories you have, of course, honoring the confidentiality of people involved. Just what are some of the effects that you've seen and how this has helped people?
Oh my goodness! Oh yeah. Okay. Actually, I anticipated this question, and I actually wrote a little list here. So I'm going to look down at my list. I can give first names, but we have Ernie, who's a Vietnam vet, who has basically Agent Orange syndrome, and he has just about everything that can be going wrong with his different systems as his body decays. He's in the CBT group, and he's also comes in for our Monday meditations. And he has told me more than once, he says, wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for Dr. Jenna, I would have been dead long a time ago. Okay, that's one guy. I've heard that same story from dozens of Wilmington vets, dozens. Most of the guys and we have a few gals too, who are in our Wilmington VA, Wilmington, Delaware VA group, graduate group, we call it, people who completed the 8-week program here. Most of them are Vietnam era veterans, PTSD, depression, anger management, sleep disorders. We have one guy yes, he was Vietnam era also, who came down with Parkinson's. And he was referred from Philadelphia to Dr. Jenna, and he comes when he can. 2 years ago, he told me, and I still see him there fairly often. 2 years ago, he told me that the year before that, his doctors had told him that he might as well get ready for the wheelchair because the end is near, something along those lines. And so last year, he went to Italy by himself, went on a river cruise, had a great old time, came back. So he is saying that his doctors don't understand how it is that he's not regressing, he's not getting worse and worse and worse. Now, clinically, in terms of heart data, et cetera, et cetera. It's an anecdote, but anyway, that's one guy. And then there's a big chunk with chronic pain like myself, chronic pain and depression. Kind of, they're like cousins anyway. They like to hang out together. So I have seen some people take to the mindfulness after MBSR, and some people don't. In fact, some people, but they'll want to say, "Can I try it again?" So they'll come back and try it again, and and then they might not make every session, so they'll come back a third time, and then slowly integrate it, try it out, because it's so hard to disengage from their suffering. It's who they are. They're this pain person. I'm this PTS being. That's me. I'm PTSD.
That's become their identity.
They've reified it to such an extent. So it's not always, dramatic like it was with me. It's not all eureka moment. I would say that actually, as I look back on the last 2 years of 6 year, about 6 years, it was kind of like the tree that I planted, a pear tree that I planted in front of our house when we moved here from Pennsylvania 10 years ago. The tree was 6 feet tall and was as round as a quarter. And the other day I looked at it and it was 20 feet tall and full. And so I'm thinking that that's how my meditation / mindfulness has been. I've been growing a tree. And so while it's growing, you don't really necessarily notice it. But I look back and I'll say, well, when this or that happens, and I used to go off the deep end, or I'd be in bed for 3 days, or I'd be an obnoxious person to whoever I got in my way, or I would misbehave. And I said, well, gee, I didn't do that. And now the part that, again, I'm looking back afterwards, I don't have the reactivity. It just doesn't come up in a lot of the ways it used to come up. And that's pretty helpful in a relationship. So that if you notice, well, you begin to understand, well, the reason I was reacting and not responding is because of the script that I was playing in the back of my mind. And so among the vets that I know, and then in my own personal story, it's been definitely an organic process. I have a heart condition in which it's a paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. I had one surgery, and I'm not going to do that again to get ablation. And if I don't live mindfully, my heart says, okay, you're going to mistreat me? I'll show you. And it goes, my pulse goes up to about 130 and then goes out of rhythm.
Yeah.
And now I've been keeping along for 5 years. And the one correlate variable in my own little one person research study is stress, meaning, do I hold this tension throughout the day? Do I drop in, go back to baseline relaxation throughout the day? Because I'm an intellectual guy. I like to dive into the information. So I want to save the world, I want to write a bunch of books. So now, of course, trying to keep the mindfulness ingredient active in my stew, I'm finding that, oh, there you go. You're in your 70s. You cannot sit at the keyboard for 9 hours straight, intensely hunched over and tensing, trying to write this wonderful paper. You can't do that. You have to notice, be aware of what your body and breathing, et cetera, mind/body is doing. And so it's kind of, I have my own built-in rheostat. If I've not been mindful in a certain situation because the AFib hits at night. It hits me at night. So those are some of the ways, and some of them I'm joking a lot. I'm using a lot of joking things. Of course, they're serious, and of course, I don't take them lightly. But
so let's shift a little bit, Dan. That I wanted to ask you is in your work with veterans and seeing mindfulness and the influence that it has on them. One criticism that I frequently hear is that mindfulness in the military is bad. It's just making, mindful snipers. It's all a bad thing. Would fall into that kind of bucket. And I was wondering how you, as a veteran, as someone who has experience with mindfulness, how you might respond to that from actually having experience with this and seeing others.
Yeah. Well, when I hear that comment from someone, it's obvious to me that I can make a judgment that they probably don't understand mindfulness if they're going to say that. At least that's my way of being judgmental. I know I'm not supposed to. But anyway, the way I see it is that most of the guys and gals that I deal with, almost all of them are from working class families and from all parts of the country. And I was born in 45, and you know, your government said this is what you do, and yes, you do. And a lot of them, so someone who follows an altruistic belief, which includes serving in the military, and then gets sent off to fight a war, which is really, really stupid on a lot of levels. If you saw Burns' series about the Vietnam War, you really know how bad it was. So those of us who were drafted, and many were drafted, but there were those who just volunteered because, well, my dad was in World War II, and it's the honorable thing to do. So if someone who joins that organization to serve something bigger than themselves, even though maybe you meaning the other person who's making the criticism, might feel that war is bad. And Donovan used to sing a song about, if only, if only all the soldiers would put down their guns, then there'd be no more war. I wish it were that simple. So there's the socioeconomic factor, but it's an altruism that motivates them, and it's service to country and all of these things. Now, patriotism is kind of back in media, on TV, and so on. Thank you for your service and all that. Most of us don't get a big charge out of that "thank you for your service" thing. Be honest with you, a lot of the younger vets, Iraq and Afghan vets, they don't like it because they know that the American public does not know what the hell is going on by their government. We had congressmen who didn't know we were in a country in Africa whose name they didn't know, or never heard of. The example of the mindful sniper is a very good way to talk about this subject. Because if you don't have all the underpinning compassion and empathy and connection interbeing, all of that Thich Nhat Hanh, all of this stuff, expressions of how we're all one and how the universe, we are humans, we're part, all of that business, if it doesn't underlie it, then it's not mindfulness as I define it. So now, I would say to someone like that, I would say that my politics are pretty far left, but I don't think the world is quite ready for a non-military, people with no military. I would love it to happen in my grandson's lifetime, but I don't think it's going to happen there. So what do you do with that guy? So that's a whole other existential discussion. But did I cover that for you? Okay.
Yeah, it covers it quite well, that there's this aspect of the people who have joined the military might not have been of the socioeconomic status, that there are other options for them in their lives, that this is a way to make money from school, and that these, demonizing people who are in the situations they're in and assuming that, mindfulness has no ethics because it's not in a context I like, is not so. And that's not how this works.
Yeah. And I think that's a very one-dimensional, simplistic way to look at a very layered, concrete, complex issue. Yeah.
So something else I wanted to ask you is just your perspective on how mindfulness has grown, at least here in the U.S.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, actually, I can speak to that. When I started mindfulvets.net, it was about 3 years ago. And it coincided with my own personal interest in the science behind mindfulness. Since it was working so well for me and helping me and creating the quality of life I'd never experienced, I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. And that's something to say. So I said, but I like data. I want, I'm not from Missouri, but I want it, show me. So as I said before, I'm a binge reader. So I got on my Google Scholar, and I got on a few other lists, and I had a variety of keywords. I didn't just use mindfulness, mindful veterans, PTSD, trauma, but then I added attending and medicine and presence. So what happened was, I'd say by late 16, I could not possibly manage all this. I have a full-time job, so I couldn't possibly filter. And so I actually had to cut down my keywords to be very specific. Research about trauma-based mindfulness is where I focus on now. So it's exploded. And sure enough, in the Altered Traits book, Daniel Goleman and Richard Davidson, just came out excellent, I thought, and they were trying to look at some of the research, the issues that you had talked with Dr. Van Dam about in the fall. And that has a graph which showed that from 16 to 15, 17, whatever, the number of papers. So now it's everybody and his brother is about mindfulness, which brings up the subject you and I have an interest in, mindfulness. or full mindfulness. I kind of like the second one. It's kind of a cool sound. But seriously, yes, the interest is, and I think it's because of the hurry, hurry, ding, ding nature of modern life, with all of our devices, and the fact that many couples both work, and that we, if you're in, modern America with internet, all of that goes with it. It's a nice balance. It's a nice balance. So definitely, my experience with the the amount of stuff coming in, it just shows it's on fire.
Great. Well, for those who are listening to this podcast, if you want to find out more about the Mindful Veterans Connection, go to mindfulvets.net. Our guest today, Dana K. Lewis. Dana, thanks for being here. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, Ted. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.